There was a night unlike any other. The wind felt like it carried a warning, and the stars seemed to watch from above. It was a night of holy judgment. Jerusalem, the old city of prophets and kings, was quiet and full of fear. Her strong walls could not calm the fear in people's hearts. Torches burned in the dark sky, but their light could not chase away the fear. Far beyond the hills and olive trees, the army of Assyria had come, a huge and powerful force, like a sea of soldiers. They wore heavy armor and showed no mercy. Their tents filled the valleys like a swarm of locusts. Their swords were ready to destroy. Their flags, stained with blood, had already seen many cities fall. Kingdoms had broken under their power. Nations had surrendered. Now they stood at the gates of Jerusalem, demanding the soul of the city. In the palace, King Hezekiah paced alone, a righteous man, a reformer of worship, and a destroyer of idols. He now faced the greatest threat of his reign. He had seen the smoke of distant cities. He had heard the boasts of Rabshakeh, the vile mouthpiece of Sennacherib. He had read the letter, a scroll drenched in arrogance and blasphemy, mocking the name of the living God. And so, in silence, Hezekiah entered the house of the Lord. He laid the letter before the Most High and fell upon his knees. His prayer was not long, but it pierced the heavens. O Lord, God of Israel, who dwells between the cherubim, you alone are God of all the kingdoms of the earth. Incline your ear, O Lord, and hear. Open your eyes and see. Save us, that all the earth may know you alone are God. Outside, the Assyrians drank and laughed and sharpened their blades. They were certain of victory. They had broken cities stronger than this one. Who was Hezekiah, they thought, that he should stand in their path? And who was this God of his compared to the gods they had already destroyed? But the God of Hezekiah was no idol, no statue carved by hands, no silent figure of wood or stone. He was the I Am, eternal, invisible, terrible in glory. And he had heard. Far above the earth, beyond the veil of stars, there is a throne, not a throne of gold, but of fire and majesty. Around it burn 7 lamps. From it, thunder rolls. Before it lies a sea like glass, and above it, wings beat without rest. In this realm, no man has walked. It is the court of the eternal. And on that night, in the presence of that throne, a being of light stood still. He was a servant of flame, a spirit of might, an angel of the Lord. He bore no crown, but he was terrible to behold. His form pulsed with divine energy. His garment shimmered with the brilliance of the sun. Upon his back, wings like lightning. In his hand, a sword not made by mortal fire. He waited, silent. Then came the voice that once said, "Let there be light," the voice that shakes mountains, the voice that the heavens obey. One night, one command, "Go." And the angel bowed. He did not ask how. He did not ask why. The will of God was clear. Justice would descend. The honor of the Holy One had been mocked, and now the armies of pride would taste the fury of heaven. The angel flew. The Assyrian camp stretched for miles. Their fires crackled. Their horses rested. Their armor gleamed under the pale moon. Tens of thousands of warriors slept, dreaming of conquest. Their commanders drank in their tents, boasting of how they would drag Hezekiah in chains and trample the altar of the God of Israel. They laughed at prophecies. They mocked prayers. They carved idols in the shapes of their own faces. They thought themselves immortal. But pride is a mist. It glows for a moment, then fades before the fire. For through the night air, silent and unseen, the angel moved. He did not come with thunder, though thunder answered him. He did not come with screams, though screams would follow. He came like stillness, deeper than silence, heavier than death. He passed through tents, he passed through rows, he passed through flesh and bone and breath. And where he passed, hearts ceased to beat. 1, 10, 100, 1,000. A commander fell from his seat, cup still in hand. A soldier dropped mid-prayer to a false god. A beast of war neighed and reared, sensing what eyes could not see. There was no clash, no battle cry, no trumpet blast. There was only a shadow, a breath, a pause, and then nothing. The angel passed through the host of Sennacherib like a wind through wheat. His blade did not cut, yet it ended. His wings did not strike, yet they silenced. He bore no hatred. He acted not in cruelty. He was an instrument of justice, and this was the judgment written before time. When the stars began to fade and the first light of dawn crept over the eastern hills, the angel returned to the heavens, and behind him the valley lay still. 185,000 souls, warriors, captains, princes, fell that night. Not one lifted a shield, not one had time to cry. In Jerusalem, the sun rose red. The guards upon the walls blinked into the distance. They expected to see chariots rolling toward the gates. Instead, they saw vultures circling. At first, they thought it a trick. Then came the scouts, wide-eyed, speechless. Then the gates opened, and the city beheld the harvest of the Lord, fields of corpses, tents silent, fires cold, swords fallen from dead hands. The great army of Assyria vanished in a night. And not by human strength, not by the might of Jerusalem, not by the sword of Judah, but by one word, one angel, one night. Inside the palace, Hezekiah tore his robes and fell to the ground in awe, not terror, awe. For the Lord had answered, the Holy One of Israel had risen to defend his name. Hezekiah did not boast. He did not sing of victory. He trembled, for he had seen the salvation of God. And in the courts of the temple, Isaiah the prophet lifted his eyes to the hills and said, This is the word the Lord has spoken. The virgin daughter of Zion has despised you and laughed you to scorn. He shall not enter this city, says the Lord, for I will defend this city to save it for my own sake and for my servant David's sake. Far across the lands, in Nineveh, the seat of earthly power, Sennacherib's throne awaited his triumph. Golden lions flanked his courts. Pavement of stone recorded his victories. Servants rehearsed songs of conquest, waiting for their king to return with spoils and stories. But no messenger arrived with good news. Only silence came first, then rumors. Then a single rider, dirt-covered, eyes hollow, voice hoarse. He did not speak in full sentences. He only muttered words like ghosts, death, fireless destruction, no blade, no battle, no answer. Behind him trailed no army. The chariots had not returned. The trumpets had gone mute. The breath of Assyria had been silenced, and Sennacherib, king of the empire of iron, whose armies crushed Egypt, Ethiopia, and Tyre, now sat upon his throne, alone. He clenched the arms of his seat, not in strength, in fear. He had mocked the God of Israel. He had stood in arrogant defiance before the throne of heaven, and now something ancient trembled in his soul, something long buried in his pride, dread. He spoke no more threats. He called no more counsels. He touched no more maps. He had seen what no mortal eyes could see and still live. He shut himself within the stone halls of his gods. But even the carvings of wood and gold could not answer his trembling, for idols cannot help the hands that made them, and false gods fall silent in the presence of the holy. In the heights of the heavenly realm, the angel stood again before the throne. His hands were clean. His countenance glowed with obedience. There was no blood on his robe, no smoke upon his wings. Yet the earth below remembered his passing like a wound carved into the soil. He said no words. He did not lift his eyes. He simply stood still and surrendered before the one who sent him. Around him, the hosts of heaven sang songs no man could write. Seraphim circled the throne, their wings covering eyes in reverence. Elders cast down crowns. Fire danced upon the sea of crystal, and still the angel waited. For the justice of God is not reckless. It is not cruel. It is not the rage of men, nor the wrath of tyrants. It is clean. It is holy. It is perfect. And this angel, the messenger of a single divine word, had delivered not just death, but the weight of eternity into the courts of mortal kings. A silent night, a righteous judgment, a remembered name, not his own, but the name of the one who sent him. In Jerusalem, Isaiah rose from his prayers. The city buzzed with voices. The people had seen the field of fallen foes. Mothers wept in thanksgiving. Fathers shouted in awe. Priests trembled, offering sacrifice. But Isaiah's face was solemn. He knew what others did not, that what happened in the valley was only a glimpse of something far greater. He climbed to the rooftop of his home and looked toward the horizon. In his spirit, he heard the whisper of the Lord, "This is my arm revealed. This is my mercy remembered. This is my holiness defended. Tell them, Isaiah, tell them I alone am God." And the prophet's heart burned. His eyes streamed tears, not of sorrow, but reverence, for he saw more than a battlefield. He saw the great theater of the Almighty, where kings rise and fall by his will, and where angels serve not for glory, but for obedience. In the alleys of Jerusalem, children danced again. They did not fully understand the miracle they now walked within, but their feet skipped over stones that might have been soaked in blood, and their songs echoed through streets that had been marked for ruin. A remnant. That was all Jerusalem was meant to be. A broken people, a small city, a flickering flame. But in the hand of the Lord, even the remnant becomes the jewel of the earth. The people gathered in the temple courts. Old men embraced weeping. Women lifted their hands in praise. The air smelled of incense and crushed myrrh. Harps were tuned, trumpets blared. But above every sound, there was one thing that rose like fire into the heavens: worship. Not because they had won, but because they had been spared. Sennacherib wandered his palace like a ghost. His halls, once filled with the laughter of victors, now echoed hollow. His guards walked with fear. His priests offered sacrifices that went unanswered. The statues of his gods stared back at him with dead eyes. And in the shadows of the temple of Nisroch, his own sons plotted. He had mocked the God of Israel, and now the breath of his line, the security of his throne, would be taken not by war, but by blood. 2 blades, 2 sons, a sudden strike, and the king of the proudest empire fell not in battle, but by betrayal, beneath the nose of the God who could not save him. Thus the word of the Lord, spoken by Isaiah, came true. The man who defied the heavens died by the hand of his own children, and so the scrolls were written. The prophets preserved the tale. The song of the one night echoed through generations. And every child of Zion from that day onward would remember that the Most High is not mocked, that he hears the prayers of the humble, that no army is too vast for his hand, that angels walk silently, but surely when sent by the word of the King of Kings. That deliverance does not come by chariot or spear, but by obedience, by mercy, by the whisper of the one who speaks, and it is done. News of the night did not stay in Judah. Caravans brought whispers. Traders repeated stories with trembling voices. Messengers ran breathless, spreading word from desert to coast, from mountain to valley. Every land that had watched Assyria rise now watched it bleed. Men who had once bowed to Sennacherib now questioned their loyalty. Kings who had once feared him now feared something greater, the invisible hand that struck without sword or siege. Every temple to every idol across the region trembled in irrelevance. The gods of iron and stone had done nothing, but the God of Israel had spoken in silence, and the world took notice. In Egypt, priests hushed their chants. In Moab and Edom, the old men looked toward Jerusalem with new respect. Even distant Babylon paused and pondered. What kind of power could slay an empire in a single breath? What kind of God walks among men and dispatches angels by command? The story traveled farther than swords ever could, and the glory was not Hezekiah's. It was not Jerusalem's. It was not the angels. It was the Lord's. In Jerusalem, the people were changed, not in riches, not in numbers, but in reverence. Children no longer sang the names of warriors, but whispered of the night when death passed over the gates. Fathers spoke less of politics and more of prayer. Mothers taught their daughters how to seek the face of God before teaching them to weave. The Levites began to sing again, not songs of tradition, but of trembling awe. Psalms were born in the hearts of those who had heard the silence outside the city and lived to tell of it. For when the Lord passes by in power, those who remain are not proud. They are reverent. They do not dance in triumph. They bow in wonder. They do not raise their voices in arrogance. They whisper his name with trembling lips. The city learned a new kind of fear, not terror, but holiness. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and Jerusalem was learning it, one prayer at a time. No man saw his face, no woman knew his name. He left behind no relic, no tomb, no trail. But the angel who carried the word that night became legend, not because he sought to be remembered, but because he obeyed without needing to be. There are angels who shout and trumpet. There are angels who guard and wrestle, but then there are angels of stillness, the ones who descend in obedience and leave a silence that shakes the nations. This one was such. He did not carry rage, he carried holiness. He did not seek to destroy, he came to reveal. He showed the world that the Lord of hosts does not slumber, and that the heavens do not sit idle when his name is mocked. Some believe he was the same who guarded Eden after Adam fell. Others wonder if he was the one who stood before Balaam's donkey, or the one who appeared to Joshua with sword drawn before Jericho. Many believe he was the angel of the Lord, a manifestation of the pre-incarnate Christ, walking in the form of a warrior. But the scroll does not name him, only the deed remains. And that is enough. Hezekiah did not forget. Years would pass. Wars would rise again. His beard would grow silver. His body would weaken. But his heart, once broken in the temple before the Lord, never hardened again. He was not perfect. There were days when pride tried to return, when visitors from Babylon came and he showed them too much, when he sought healing and the Lord gave it, but his praise did not rise high enough. But through it all, he carried the memory of that night like a seal upon his chest. He knew what it was to stand alone. He knew what it was to be mocked. But more than that, he knew what it was to be heard. Hezekiah's greatness was not in his strategy or speeches or soldiers. It was in the prayer he prayed on the floor of the temple, the prayer that moved heaven, the prayer that summoned an angel, the prayer that reminded all of Israel that when everything else is stripped away and the enemy stands at the gate, the most powerful thing a king can do is kneel. That night did more than defeat an army. It adjusted the axis of history. It told every generation afterward that God does not sleep through injustice. It told every oppressor that the breath they breathe is not their own. It told every remnant that no matter how small, how surrounded, how hopeless, they are not forgotten. Because heaven listens to the brokenhearted, to the faithful few, to the widow praying in secret, to the shepherd singing in the fields, to the prophet crying in the wilderness, to the king on his knees. Heaven listens. And sometimes it answers with mercy, and sometimes it answers with angels.